Why are millions of travelers suddenly crossing the United States off their bucket lists? What's happening in one of the most visited countries on Earth, a place once seen as the symbol of freedom, dreams, and unforgettable vacations, that's now making people around the world say, no thanks? For decades, the United States was the gold standard of global tourism. From the neon lights of Times Square to the serene landscapes of the Grand Canyon, millions of tourists flocked in year after year, pouring billions into the economy and feeding the massive machine that is America's travel industry. But today, that engine is sputtering. Quietly but unmistakably, something has shifted. Across social media, travel forums, and news headlines, a disturbing trend is becoming impossible to ignore. Millions of tourists are canceling their trips to the US. And many are vowing never to return, not because they've already seen it all, but because what they're seeing now is pushing them away. Ask yourself, what would make someone scrap an entire trip they've dreamed about for years? What would lead families, honeymooners, students, and solo adventurers to turn away from one of the richest, most powerful, most culturally influential nations in the world? The answers are layered, complex, and deeply revealing. Let's start with the vibe, the perception of the US as a destination. In the digital age, word travels fast, and the stories traveling around today don't paint a flattering picture. Gun violence, racial tensions, political polarization, and unpredictable immigration policies have all become part of the international narrative about America. Headlines that once inspired curiosity now provoke anxiety. Images of smiling tourists at Disneyland are competing with viral videos of airport chaos and public shootings. Safety, once a secondary thought when planning a vacation, has now taken center stage. And for many would-be visitors, the US no longer feels like a safe bet. Then there's the rising cost of everything. Hotels that charge $300 a night before taxes and resort fees. Domestic flights that fluctuate wildly. Hidden charges, tipping culture confusion, and a general sense that tourists are being squeezed at every turn. In a global economy where travelers are looking for value, many are realizing that the US just isn't worth the price anymore, especially when other countries offer safer, friendlier, and more affordable experiences. But the reasons go deeper still. There's something more intangible. A sense that the American dream has lost its shine for outsiders. That the hospitality isn't what it used to be. That you're walking into a place wrestling with its own identity, and that tourists are being caught in the crossfire. What's happening right now isn't just a blip. It's a shift in how the world sees the United States. A shift in how it feels to walk its streets, to enter its borders, to try to understand its mood. And while official tourism agencies scramble to reassure and rebrand, the truth is being spoken every day. Not on glossy brochures, but in real time through Instagram stories, Reddit threads, travel blogs, and flight cancellation emails. Millions of people are no longer willing to take the risk, emotionally, financially, or physically. The question isn't just why this is happening, but what it means for the future of the US as a global destination. And perhaps most importantly, who's stepping in to take its place. And as this quiet exodus from the United States unfolds, one question keeps surfacing again and again. Have you ever reconsidered traveling to the US, or even cancelled your trip entirely? We want to hear your voice. Drop a comment below and tell us what would make you feel safe and welcome visiting America again, or if you've found a better destination, share where you're heading instead. Your experience might help someone else rethink their plans too. If this topic caught your attention, if it made you think, or opened your eyes to a global shift most people aren't even noticing yet, hit the like button. It helps push this conversation further. And if you want more deep, honest, and global takes like this one, where we go beyond the headlines and dive into the real forces reshaping our world, then make sure to subscribe. There's so much more we're about to uncover. Now let's get into what's really driving this change and how it could redefine travel as we know it. A silent exodus. Why travelers are turning away from the US. There's something happening beneath the surface of the tourism industry. Quiet, gradual, but powerful enough to shake the very image of a nation once considered the pinnacle of global travel. For decades, the United States was more than just a destination. It was a symbol, a dream, a promise of freedom, adventure, and cinematic experiences that few places on Earth could rival. Tourists came for the vast landscapes, the iconic cities, the pop culture, the innovation, and the feeling that they were stepping into the center of the world. But now, something has shifted. A silent exodus is underway, and most people still aren't talking about it. International arrivals to the United States have been declining, not in a dramatic collapse, but in a steady, calculated retreat. Millions of travelers are canceling trips, changing itineraries, or bypassing the country entirely. And while some chalk it up to post-pandemic aftershocks or shifting travel trends, the truth is far more layered and far more troubling. What makes this exodus particularly fascinating is how subtle and decentralized it is. There's no single incident, no viral campaign, no one moment that sparked it. Instead, it's a combination of whispers, conversations happening in group chats, in travel vlogs, in Reddit threads, in cafes across Europe, Asia, and South America. A sense of disillusionment is spreading, a slow erosion of the belief that visiting the United States is worth it. And once that idea begins to slip, it doesn't come back easily. Many of these travelers cite frustration, endless bureaucracy when trying to get a visa, unpredictable delays at customs, and a general sense that entering the US has become more of an interrogation than a welcome. There's a psychological shift here that's important. Tourism is an emotional decision. People don't just travel for sights. They travel for a feeling, for a memory, for the story they'll tell when they go back home. And when that feeling becomes one of stress, fear, or rejection, it stains the entire experience. But bureaucracy is only the tip of the iceberg. There's a deeper story playing out, rooted in perception. In the global imagination, the US has started to change color, not just politically but culturally. Once seen as vibrant and open, it now often appears fractured and tense. News reports of mass shootings, racial conflicts, and political unrest travel far. In a digital world, every moment of chaos is instantly globalized. And whether or not these images represent the full truth of the country, perception often outweighs reality, especially in tourism. It's not that other countries don't have problems, they do, but there's a particular expectation when it comes to the United States. People don't just go there to see a landmark, they go to experience the American moment. And when that moment starts to feel tainted, tourists turn elsewhere. Another element quietly influencing this shift is the emotional climate. There's a growing sense among international visitors that the US doesn't feel as warm or welcoming as it once did, that the famed hospitality is fading, that the smiles feel rehearsed, the service rushed, the energy more transactional than personal. In an era where travel is increasingly driven by emotional connection, that coldness is costly. Interestingly, this decline isn't always acknowledged publicly. Tourism boards push positive numbers. Airlines release optimistic forecasts. But the stories from travelers tell a different tale. It just didn't feel safe. Everything was so expensive. People looked at me weird. These aren't formal complaints. They're private revelations, and they're multiplying. The question that looms is, can this trend be reversed, or is the United States quietly losing its grip as a global travel leader? When a country begins to lose its emotional appeal, when people no longer daydream about its streets or fantasize about its skylines, the damage runs deeper than economic. It strikes at the heart of national identity. This isn't just about tourism. It's about what the world sees when it looks at America. It's about whether people still believe in the story the US has spent decades telling. And right now, many are starting to look away, not with anger, but with quiet disappointment. And that's what makes this exodus so dangerous. It's not loud, it's not angry, it's silent. And silence, in the world of travel, is far more lethal than criticism. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever felt this shift yourself, whether you're from the US or abroad? Have you noticed a change in how people talk about traveling to America? Drop a comment below with your thoughts. If you've ever said, "I was going to go, but I changed my mind," share why. You can even just comment with, "The energy feels different," because sometimes that says everything. Visa nightmares and border anxiety. The moment a traveler even considers visiting the United States, the process begins, not with excitement, but with tension. Long before they ever set foot on American soil, the experience often starts with bureaucratic dread. The US visa application system has become infamous in global travel communities, not just for its complexity, but for the emotional weight it carries. Tourists are no longer just planning a vacation. They're preparing for scrutiny, for possible rejection, for an ordeal that feels more like a legal battle than a holiday. In many countries, securing a US tourist visa can take months, sometimes over a year. Embassies are backed up, interviews are hard to schedule, and the documentation requirements grow more rigid by the year. Proof of financial stability, job letters, property ownership, travel histories, all demanded from people who, more often than not, just want to see the Statue of Liberty or visit Disneyland. But what's even more disheartening is how arbitrary the outcomes often seem. People with spotless records, full-time jobs and solid plans are routinely denied with no clear explanation. It leaves applicants feeling not just rejected, but humiliated. It tells them, "You're not welcome." And for many, that's enough to never try again. This isn't just anecdotal. Across forums, travel blogs, and online communities, stories of visa trauma are shared like cautionary tales. People describe being treated with suspicion, spoken to like criminals, or asked invasive questions that have little to do with tourism. The emotional tone is striking, not anger, but disillusionment. Some compare it to being profiled. Others say it feels like proving your innocence without knowing the crime. The result? More and more travelers are turning their attention elsewhere, toward countries that make them feel trusted, not tested. But even for those who do manage to secure a visa, the anxiety doesn't stop there. Entering the US border has become a psychological hurdle of its own. Travelers speak of customs and border protection officers who come off more like interrogators than greeters. Stories abound of hours-long detentions, invasive phone checks, luggage searches, and sometimes even deportation upon arrival, with no warning, no refund, and no legal recourse. The randomness of it all has created a kind of border lottery, where even the most legitimate tourist can be pulled aside and treated like a suspect. This environment has real consequences. Tourists now actively plan around these risks. Many travelers from Latin America, the Middle East, or parts of Africa say they simply avoid the US entirely, not because they don't love the culture or want to visit, but because the experience of entering feels like walking into a trap. And in a world where travel is meant to be an escape, no one wants to start their vacation with fear. There's also a rising sense that America's border anxiety isn't just about security, it's about identity. That who you are, how you look, what passport you carry, and even what religion you follow may determine how you're treated. This perception is devastating for the tourism industry, because when travelers begin to feel that their identity is a liability, they stop seeing the destination as an adventure and start seeing it as a threat. What's more, this isn't just a problem for first-time visitors. Even repeat tourists, people who've been to the US multiple times, spent thousands of dollars, and obeyed every rule, say they're thinking twice. Why risk being turned away after landing? Why spend time and money to feel judged, questioned, or misunderstood? It's not just about access, it's about dignity, about whether travelers feel valued, respected, and human throughout the process. And in the age of digital storytelling, these experiences don't stay private. A single post about a bad experience at LAX or JFK can go viral in minutes. A travel vlogger recounting their interrogation at the border can reach millions. These stories shape perceptions faster than any tourism campaign can fix. They create emotional associations that linger. America equals hassle, America equals hostility, America equals humiliation. Meanwhile, other countries are doing the exact opposite. They're simplifying entry, offering digital nomad visas, rolling out red carpets for tourists. Portugal, for example, allows many nationals to enter visa-free. Thailand is expanding its visa-on-arrival policy. Colombia is offering 6-month stays with minimal paperwork. These nations understand something crucial. In today's competitive travel market, friction is fatal, and for now, the US is wrapped in red tape. So while the United States still has unmatched natural beauty, world-class cities, and iconic landmarks, the emotional cost of visiting has become too high for many. The moment someone has to think, will I be treated fairly? Or what if they don't let me in? That's the moment a vacation turns into a risk. And with so many other destinations now offering simplicity, warmth, and accessibility, more and more people are asking themselves, why bother? Have you or someone you know ever had a rough visa or border experience with the US? If so, let us know in the comments. You don't have to go into detail, just comment, it's not worth the stress, or even, been there, done that if this resonates with you. Your story matters, and trust me, you're not alone. The rise of global alternatives. While the United States remains a powerful presence in the world of tourism, something significant is happening beyond its borders. As travelers grow weary of the barriers and tensions that come with visiting the US, and a new chapter is unfolding, one where global alternatives are not just available, but increasingly preferred. Destinations that were once considered secondary choices are now becoming the first pick, not just because they're easier to access, but because they offer something many feel the US is slowly losing: ease, charm, and emotional connection. There's a quiet revolution happening in the travel landscape. Countries like Portugal, Japan, Mexico, Vietnam, Colombia, and even emerging destinations in Eastern Europe and North Africa are stepping forward with a clear message: we want you here. And that message isn't just found in ads or government press releases. It's in the way you're greeted at the airport. It's in the smiles of locals, the efficiency of immigration, the simplicity of booking experiences, and the affordability that makes you feel like your money matters. These places are learning something America has long taken for granted. Tourism isn't a right, it's an invitation. And if that invitation doesn't feel sincere, people won't RSVP. One of the strongest examples of this shift is Portugal. Over the last decade, it has transformed itself from a quiet corner of Europe into a global tourism magnet. Why? Because it offers safety, walkability, incredible food, stunning coastlines, and, most importantly, a deep sense of welcoming calm. People walk Lisbon's streets and feel at peace. No anxiety about violence, no tension with locals, no overcomplicated systems. The energy is different. It feels human. And in an age where people are increasingly looking to escape chaos, that vibe is powerful. Meanwhile, Southeast Asia continues to rise as one of the most traveler-friendly regions in the world. Countries like Thailand and Vietnam not only provide jaw-dropping nature and rich culture, but also hospitality that feels genuine. It's not just about tourism dollars, it's about the experience. The kindness you feel in a market, the freedom to explore without being watched, the ability to immerse yourself without fear. The simplicity of getting a visa or extending a stay plays a massive role. But so does the emotional undercurrent. You're not just allowed to be there, you're wanted there. The same can be said for Latin America, particularly countries like Colombia, Peru, and Costa Rica. Despite their own challenges, they've managed to position themselves as accessible, vibrant, and emotionally rich destinations. The cost of living is lower, the food is soulful, and the pace of life offers a stark contrast to the rushed, transactional energy found in many American cities. And here's the kicker, travelers are talking, not just in private messages or closed groups, but on YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram. Influencers with global reach are sharing their personal revelations. I thought I wanted to visit New York, then I found Cartagena. I dreamed of Miami, but Medellin felt like home. These aren't sponsored posts. They're lived experiences, and their impact is seismic. Let's not overlook how these global alternatives are leveraging digital nomad culture. As remote work expands, many of these countries have recognized the opportunity to attract long-term visitors who can blend travel with lifestyle. They're offering streamlined visas, tax incentives, and community infrastructure. And again, it's not just about policy, it's about emotional resonance. When someone says, "I felt safer and freer in Tbilisi than I ever did in LA," it challenges the long-held assumption that the US is the ultimate destination. And of course, there's the financial equation. In an age of inflation, budget consciousness, and skyrocketing airfare, travelers are re-evaluating where they get the most value. Spending $5,000 on a week in New York, between flights, hotels, food, and incidentals, doesn't carry the same appeal when that same budget could buy a month in Bali, complete with beachfront lodging, daily excursions, and cultural immersion. It's not just about saving money, it's about investing in memory-rich experiences that feel less like consumerism and more like discovery. This rise of global alternatives is not an attack on the United States. It's a reflection of a shifting global mindset, a mindset that prioritizes simplicity, humanity, and emotional return on investment. People are no longer just chasing the most iconic skyline or the biggest theme park. They're chasing peace, presence, connection. And as more travelers share their stories of joy found elsewhere, the gravitational pull of the US weakens. The most fascinating part is how silent this movement has been. There's no global campaign to dethrone the US, no organized boycott, just a growing stream of people choosing something else. And in a world driven by word of mouth and digital storytelling, that choice speaks volumes. Now I want to pass the mic to you. If you've ever discovered a destination that surprised you, somewhere that felt better than expected, safer than you imagined, more welcoming than the US, drop it in the comments. Just write, "My unexpected paradise was," and finish the sentence. Let's help others explore the world beyond what they're used to, because sometimes the best places are the ones we never saw coming. Mass shootings and public safety concerns. Every country has its issues. No place is perfect. But when it comes to perceptions of public safety, the United States is facing a crisis that's not only internal, it's global. For millions of potential travelers around the world, one word has begun to overshadow the idea of visiting America: guns. And behind that word, a wave of constant headlines, shocking videos, and devastating statistics has made what was once seen as an exciting, dynamic destination feel more like a risk than a reward. The impact of mass shootings on tourism might not be easy to quantify in exact numbers, but it is impossible to ignore in the emotional undercurrent that runs through the international travel community. Tourists aren't just reading about violence in the US, they're seeing it unfold in real time. Every incident, whether in a school, a shopping mall, a concert, or a subway station, is broadcast instantly across platforms like Instagram, TikTok, and X, formerly Twitter. These images don't fade easily. They linger in the imagination. They create a chilling association that's hard to shake. That danger in the US can erupt anywhere, at any moment, without warning. And for many who are simply looking to explore, relax, and enjoy a cultural escape, that sense of randomness is a deal breaker. This isn't about paranoia, it's about pattern recognition. When shootings occur with such frequency that they become normalized in news cycles, international observers take notice. Parents thinking about a family trip to Orlando start asking hard questions. Young couples planning a cross-country road trip begin reconsidering. Solo travelers think twice. There's a growing discomfort with the unpredictability of American public life, a sense that even the most everyday environments can suddenly become scenes of tragedy. And that's not something a traveler can simply compartmentalize or ignore. For decades, the US sold itself to the world on the promise of freedom, excitement, and open exploration. But now, many of the spaces that once embodied that promise, public parks, city squares, nightlife venues, feel compromised. There's a subtle fear that replaces spontaneity, a hesitation that shadows curiosity. The psychology of safety is delicate, and once a destination begins to feel emotionally unsafe, it's hard to rebuild that trust. It doesn't matter how beautiful the skyline is or how impressive the museums are, if the underlying energy feels tense or uneasy. The numbers reinforce these fears. Mass shootings are not only more frequent in the US than in any other developed nation, they're also growing more deadly. And while politicians debate the causes and solutions, the rest of the world watches, often in disbelief. Because to many outside the US, the idea of needing to worry about a shooting during a shopping trip or a visit to a theme park is unthinkable. And yet in America, it's a risk that's factored in. That reality alone creates a psychological barrier that's hard to overcome. There's also the emotional impact of witness accounts. Travelers who've experienced lockdowns during incidents, tourists who've been caught in the panic of a false alarm, families who've left vacations early after a nearby shooting. These stories circulate quickly, especially on platforms where people trust peer-to-peer reviews more than official tourism sites. No amount of marketing can counteract a heartfelt post from a traveler who says, "We had to hide in a store during a shooting scare. I'll never go back." It's not that other countries don't face violence, but the nature and frequency of public shootings in the US have created a specific kind of emotional fatigue and fear. When travelers choose a destination, they don't just consider attractions, they consider atmosphere. Is it peaceful? Is it joyful? Is it safe to let your guard down? Increasingly, people are saying that in America, the answer feels like no. And this fear isn't limited to tourists from wealthier nations. Visitors from Latin America, Asia, and the Middle East, many of whom deal with their own domestic challenges, still express shock at the violence in America, because they see the US as a place that should be beyond such chaos. That contradiction between the country's image and its reality creates a form of emotional dissonance. It raises questions about whether the US is truly worth the cost, not just in money, but in peace of mind. Compounding the issue is the lack of a unified response. With each new tragedy, the world watches as outrage flares, fades, and then flares again. The sense of helplessness that many Americans feel is mirrored by confusion abroad. Why, people ask, does this keep happening? And why does it seem like nothing changes? For international travelers, the lack of clarity and consistency in addressing these problems makes the US feel unstable. Not necessarily in a political sense, but in the lived, day-to-day reality of simply being there. This perception matters because tourism is built not just on infrastructure or attractions, but on trust. And when that trust is shaken, when the very act of walking down a street or sitting in a cafe feels potentially dangerous, people stop showing up, not because they hate the US, but because they no longer feel safe loving it. I'm curious to hear your take on this. If you've ever felt uneasy about safety while traveling, or if a news story ever made you cancel or rethink a trip, share it in the comments. Even just writing, "It made me pause," tells us a lot. Sometimes those few words carry the weight of 100 statistics, rising costs, declining value. It's no secret that travel isn't just about the destination anymore. It's about the balance between experience and expense. And when it comes to that balance, The United States is increasingly being seen as a bad investment. For years, travelers around the world accepted that a trip to the US would be pricey, but they also believed it would be worth it. The problem now is that for many, that equation has changed. The costs are going up, yes, but the value is going down. And when a destination no longer feels like it rewards the time, money, and emotional energy invested, people start looking elsewhere. That's exactly what's happening. Across major cities like New York, San Francisco, Miami, and Los Angeles, prices have reached what some tourists are calling insulting. A hotel room that used to cost $150 a night now pushes $350, and that's before taxes, fees, or the infamous resort charges that have become all too common. A basic meal can run upwards of $30 per person without drinks. Public transportation, often lacking in coverage and efficiency, doesn't offer the kind of affordability or ease that you'd expect from a global tourism hub. And don't even mention the ride shares. What used to be a $12 Uber is now $35 at rush hour. Every part of the American travel experience feels like it comes with a surcharge, and people are noticing. It's not just about money. It's about the emotional impact of spending that money and feeling underwhelmed in return. Visitors often describe a sense of being nickeled and dimed at every turn, from airport snacks to museum entrances, from parking fees to tipping expectations. It starts to feel like you're constantly leaking cash without receiving a proportional boost in quality or service. And when people feel exploited rather than welcomed, they don't come back. Even worse, they tell others not to go. In the age of peer reviews and social media storytelling, that kind of feedback spreads faster than any official tourism campaign can. Travelers also report a drop in the quality of experiences they once loved. Museums feel overcrowded and rushed. Restaurants focus more on TikTok trends than on authentic culinary moments. Hotels cut corners while raising prices, removing services that used to be standard, like daily cleaning or breakfast, in the name of post-pandemic adjustments. The emotional result is a growing feeling of disappointment, and disappointment is a powerful deterrent in travel. When people start thinking, I could have had a better experience elsewhere for half the price, they mean it, and next time they act on it. Even attractions that once seemed immune to criticism, theme parks like Disney World or landmarks like the Grand Canyon, are now facing a wave of skepticism. Families who used to save for years to make the trip are now questioning if it's even worth the financial strain. The cost of admission alone is staggering, not to mention food, merchandise, or lodging nearby. Travelers compare it to theme parks in Europe or Asia, where the quality is just as high, but the prices are more family-friendly and the atmosphere feels less like a corporate machine and more like an adventure. There's also a widening gap between expectation and reality, especially for first-time visitors. The American dream, once sold globally through film and television, promised vibrant cities, friendly faces, and iconic experiences. But for many travelers, the dream is quickly replaced by confusion and frustration, by dirty subway stations, aggressive drivers, or the harsh economic disparity visible in public spaces. These moments don't just break the illusion, they reshape the memory. A trip that should have felt magical ends up feeling transactional, even hollow. Meanwhile, travelers who venture to other parts of the world are coming back with glowing reports. They speak of countries where their money stretches further, where experiences feel more personal, where they're not just customers but guests. And these stories carry weight. A traveler who says, I spent 2 weeks in Argentina for the price of 3 days in New York, is sending a loud message, especially when they follow it with, and I felt more welcome there. This shift in perception has been slowly building for years, but the current economic climate has accelerated it. With global inflation, unstable currencies, and rising interest rates, people are thinking harder about how they spend their travel dollars. They're prioritizing emotional returns, not just status symbols. And right now, the US is struggling to deliver those emotional returns. It's offering a high-cost experience without the premium feel. That kind of mismatch leads to what marketers call value dissonance, when the price you pay doesn't align with how you feel afterward. And once people experience that once, they rarely make the same mistake twice. All of this brings us back to one simple truth. Travelers are no longer willing to settle. They're no longer dazzled by brands or names alone. They want richness, not just in scenery, but in meaning. They want to feel that the place they're visiting respects their presence, their time, and their wallet. And when a country as big and bold as the United States starts to feel like it's taking more than it's giving, people take their curiosity elsewhere. What about you? Have you ever taken a trip that felt like it just wasn't worth it? Or maybe you've heard a friend say, "I spent way too much and barely enjoyed it." If you've been there, share your story. Just comment, "overpriced and underwhelming," or "I expected more." If this part of the video speaks to you, let's keep it honest, because real travel stories help shape better travel decisions. Political tensions and anti-foreigner sentiment. There was a time when the United States was seen as the great melting pot, a place where cultures, languages, and beliefs could collide, mix, and coexist under the banner of freedom. That image, carefully cultivated through decades of media, diplomacy, and immigration narratives, was one of America's greatest soft powers. But in recent years, something has fractured that perception. For many international travelers, the emotional landscape of the United States has shifted. It no longer feels like a welcoming experiment in diversity. It feels polarized, defensive, even hostile. And for tourists simply looking for exploration and ease, that political and social tension becomes an invisible weight that presses down on the entire experience. Travel is supposed to be a break from stress, not an immersion into it. Yet visitors stepping off a plane into major American cities are immediately met with a social climate that feels heavy. Whether it's overhearing arguments about politics in coffee shops, catching glimpses of protests on street corners, or feeling the undertone of division in casual conversations, there's a pervasive sense that something isn't right. This tension doesn't stay in the background. It follows people. It shapes the way they move, the questions they ask, even the photos they take. Suddenly, instead of feeling curious and inspired, they feel like outsiders, watching a nation wrestle with itself. What makes this dynamic even more complicated is the growing sense that being a foreigner in the US no longer guarantees the charm or fascination it once did. Tourists who speak another language, dress differently, or simply look out of place report feeling scrutinized in subtle ways. Extra questions from staff, suspicious glances in certain neighborhoods, or moments of social coldness that sting in unexpected ways. It's not always overt discrimination, but rather a cumulative discomfort. And that discomfort chips away at the sense of safety and acceptance that's essential for any meaningful travel experience. This isn't a perception built from a single event. It's the result of years of rhetoric that has painted foreigners, especially from specific regions, as threats rather than guests. Political speeches, news coverage, and online debates have created an emotional wall that many visitors now feel as soon as they arrive. Even travelers from allied nations say the difference is tangible. There's a defensiveness in the air, an edge in interactions, a sense that hospitality has been replaced by suspicion, and that emotional energy travels fast. It's discussed in airport lounges, in hostel kitchens, in WhatsApp groups, and on YouTube comment sections. What's more, the visibility of guns, political slogans, and polarized symbols in public spaces can be deeply jarring for someone unfamiliar with the American context. A tourist walking through a US suburb and seeing flags with aggressive messaging or billboards referencing political movements doesn't interpret them through a local lens. They see instability, they see a culture in conflict, and that perception, even if it doesn't represent the full reality, becomes the dominant memory they carry home. Because in travel, the emotional takeaway is everything. Even acts that once felt empowering, like discussing global issues or cultural perspectives with locals, now feel risky. Visitors fear saying the wrong thing, being misunderstood, or stepping into a political landmine they weren't prepared for. And so, they withdraw. They keep their interactions brief. They stick to safe zones and tourist traps. They start to experience America not as a country, but as a surface. And when you travel halfway across the world to reach a place, only to feel like you have to emotionally armor yourself every day you're there, it leaves a lasting mark. Of course, not every American is hostile. In fact, many tourists still find warmth, kindness, and generosity in individual encounters. But the national mood has shifted, and moods are contagious. A traveler doesn't need to be attacked to feel unwelcome. They only need to be ignored, misunderstood, or left out enough times to start questioning if they ever belonged there in the first place. And when that seed of doubt is planted, it's hard to unfeel. This is especially true for travelers from communities that have been the focus of political controversy: immigrants, Muslims, Latinos, or those from countries portrayed as adversarial. These visitors carry a heightened awareness of how they might be perceived. And even if nothing overt happens, the emotional labor of being cautious, of constantly reading the room, of wondering if they're safe or wanted, it all adds up. It changes the way they engage with the country. It shortens their stay. And perhaps most importantly, it stops them from recommending the experience to others. The result is a form of emotional erosion. America hasn't closed its borders to tourists, but it has, in many cases, closed its heart. The openness that once defined the travel experience here feels harder to find. And in a world where hospitality is being redefined by countries eager to fill the gap, that lack of emotional connection becomes a competitive weakness. So, let's open the floor. Have you ever felt like politics or social tension ruined a trip for you, not just in the US, but anywhere? If so, share it in the comments. Or just write, "I felt the tension," if that captures it for you. Your voice helps build a fuller picture, one that goes beyond the travel brochures and straight into the real experience. Travel influencers changing the narrative. While official tourism boards spend millions trying to shape a country's image, a new force has quietly taken over the global conversation: the voice of the traveler. More specifically, the voice of the digital traveler. In today's world, the story of a destination is no longer written in brochures or broadcast through television commercials. It's shaped, shared, and reshaped by everyday people with cameras, smartphones, and platforms. And travel influencers have become the unexpected diplomats of global tourism. When it comes to the United States, their message is clear. The narrative is shifting, and more than ever, people are listening. Scroll through Instagram or TikTok, and you'll find a growing number of travel creators openly expressing doubts about visiting the US. And offering alternatives they believe are safer, cheaper, more fulfilling. These aren't political messages or dramatic boycotts. They're deeply personal accounts. Vlogs that capture moments of discomfort at immigration, stories that detail cultural miscommunications, or reels that highlight how expensive, overwhelming, or even underwhelming certain US cities can feel. And because these influencers speak the language of relatable truth, their words carry weight. They're not filtered by corporate interests. They're shaped by real-time experience. This shift isn't just anecdotal, it's systemic. Influencers once begged for partnerships with American brands, hoping for the dream of shooting in New York or collaborating with a West Coast tourism board. Now many of them are turning to countries that actively roll out the welcome mat. Nations like Albania, Georgia, Morocco, and Malaysia are working directly with digital creators to position themselves as the new dream. And it's working. As influencers post about the simplicity of local travel, the richness of culture, and the kindness of strangers, they are rewriting the global map of desire. Instead of "I want to go to LA," more and more followers are commenting, "I never thought about Vietnam until I saw this," or "I didn't know Portugal was this beautiful." And that's the power of the influencer in today's travel economy. They aren't just documenting experiences, they're redirecting flows of human movement. Their stories, reviews, and recommendations reach millions, often with more emotional impact than an entire country's marketing budget. And what's crucial is that this power isn't abstract, it's personal. Followers trust them because they feel like friends, not salespeople. So when a popular creator says, "I didn't feel safe walking around downtown Chicago at night," that one sentence can shape thousands of decisions. When they say, "I felt watched at the airport in Miami," it doesn't just inform, it warns. Equally influential are the creators who once loved the US and are now expressing disillusionment. These are voices that previously promoted American culture with passion, those who once glamorized New York street style or documented Route 66 road trips with wide-eyed excitement. Now, many are returning to their audiences with a softer, sadder tone, not because they hate the US, but because they've outgrown the version of it that once felt magical. They talk about feeling emotionally drained, disappointed, even invisible. And those reflections hit harder than outright criticism because they're rooted in love that turned to loss. At the same time, influencers based in other countries are now spotlighting their own regions with fresh energy. They're showing sides of their cities that mainstream media never bothered to highlight. Hidden alley cafes in Istanbul, street art scenes in Bogotá, sustainable surf towns in Sri Lanka. The message here is subtle but powerful. You don't need the US to find excitement, diversity, or meaning. It exists all around the world. You just haven't looked hard enough yet. And for audiences eager for authenticity, these stories are not just appealing, they're liberating. It's also worth noting that the influencer economy thrives on engagement, and right now, posts that critique the American experience are getting traction. Comments flood in from around the world, confirming similar experiences, sharing travel tips, or expressing gratitude for the honesty. The algorithms reward this authenticity, the platforms amplify it, and suddenly, one creator's bad experience in Las Vegas becomes a viral thread that reaches Japan, Brazil, Kenya, and Poland. What was once private becomes public. What was once local becomes global. That is the multiplier effect of digital storytelling. All of this is happening while American tourism authorities struggle to control the message. While official campaigns focus on slogans and smiling actors, real people are sharing real frustrations. While websites promote freedom and fun, creators are uploading videos titled, "Why I Won't Go Back to the US," and for millions of viewers who trust those creators more than any brand or institution, that's all they need to decide. Maybe I'll go somewhere else. So here's where I want to hear from you. Has an influencer ever changed your mind about a destination, either positively or negatively? If you've ever skipped a trip or discovered a hidden gem because someone you follow told a real story, share it below. You can even just write, "They convinced me," if that's ever happened to you. These stories matter because in a world where tourism is now shaped by voices, your voice might be next. If you've made it this far, we want to know, how did this video speak to your heart? Leave a comment below with the words, "I enjoyed the content," and feel free to share how this message resonated with you personally. Your voice matters, and your story might inspire someone else who's navigating the same thoughts or experiences. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on more eye-opening, transformative content like this. Hit the like button if this video brought you clarity, sparked reflection, or simply made you feel seen. It's one small click that helps us keep this mission going strong. And of course, make sure to watch the next video that's already waiting for you on the end screen. It could be exactly what you need to hear today. May God bless your life abundantly and guide you in every step of your journey. We'll see you in the next one.